What can one man do? Timothy Dalton's 1923 villain is a sly mockery of James Bond. Timothy Dalton's Donald Whitfield subtly mocked James Bond at the same time as he mocked Spencer Dutton, Brandon Sklenar, in 1923 Season 2, Episode 6. The long-awaited return of Spencer Dutton to the Yellowstone Ranch very nearly happened in 1923 Season 2, Episode 6. As Spencer gets closer to home, Donald Whitfield and Banner Creighton's Jerome Flynn plans to take over the Yellowstone and kill the Dutton family tree are getting closer to being foiled. As Whitfield's final appearance in the finale of 1923 Season 2 approaches, Taylor Sheridan took a chance to poke a little fun at James Bond. After hearing about Spencer receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor for his service in World War I and working as a big game hunter in Africa, Banner Creighton was rightfully afraid of him. He tried to warn Whitfield, but Dalton's character dismissed him, saying, "What can one man do?" Whitfield still sent men to intercept Spencer, but his words seemed like a bit of ironic foreshadowing, as Spencer could easily end up killing him to protect the Yellowstone. Hidden in Whitfield's mockery of Spencer, however, there was also a bit of mockery at 007's expense. The irony of Whitfield's "What can one man do?" comment likely wasn't lost on anyone who has seen Timothy Dalton's two films as James Bond, The Living Daylights and License to Kill. The entire James Bond franchise repeatedly proves that a single person can do anything, even save the world, and it's particularly funny for a former 007 like Dalton to play a character who takes the opposite view. Dalton is obviously playing a different character in 1923, but if anyone should know the power of a single man, it's an actor best known for playing the most famous super spy in film history. Whitfield's one-man comments weren't the only way 1923 has riffed on Timothy Dalton's history with the James Bond franchise. One of the most prominent parts of 007's character throughout the decades has been his sexual escapades. Bond girls are as ubiquitous a part of the franchise as Blofeld or Monty Norman's iconic theme song. 1923 also flipped the Bond girls trope on its head by focusing on Whitfield's infatuation with sexual sadism and training Lindy, Madison Elise Rogers, to manipulate politicians. Whitfield is basically a more explicit version of Bond's constant womanizing taken to a perverse and vile extreme. Donald Whitfield's sexual habits in comparison to James Bond also highlight why Timothy Dalton was the perfect actor to play the part in 1923. Dalton is a great actor, but the fact that he was a former 007 also adds to Whitfield's villainy. A lot of viewers would have expected Dalton to play a more heroic character, and even after that initial shock, it's still a bit unnerving to see James Bond torture women and threaten to destroy an entire family for a profit. 1923 basically cast a former James Bond actor as a James Bond villain, and it has worked wonderfully. In the sweeping saga of 1923, Taylor Sheridan's prequel to Yellowstone, the narrative is filled with brutal realism, frontier justice, and power-hungry men. Yet one of the most fascinating and insidious characters in the series is Donald Whitfield, played by none other than Timothy Dalton. A seasoned actor known for his brooding intensity, Dalton infuses Whitfield with a sinister charm that feels both eerily familiar and wickedly subversive. For those attuned to cinematic history, Whitfield may seem like an unexpected echo of a role Dalton once played, James Bond. But rather than being a mere iteration, Whitfield serves as a scathing, ironic deconstruction of the legendary 007. The smooth, stylish, morally ambiguous super spy is warped into a ruthless capitalist overlord, a man whose power lies not in government-sanctioned missions, but in the unchecked dominion of wealth and manipulation. So what can one man do? If that man is James Bond, the answer is save the world, take down an international syndicate, or seduce a spy's mistress. If that man is Donald Whitfield, the answer is suffocate a town, entrap a struggling family, and bend an entire society to his will. 1923 reimagines Bond's gallant heroism into a twisted mirror, reflecting what happens when charm, intelligence, and resourcefulness serve only the interests of greed and corruption. The Bond archetype, twisted and reversed. Timothy Dalton's Bond was different from those before him, more serious, emotionally invested, and deadly. His portrayal in The Living Daylights, 1987, and License to Kill, 1989, was darker, more complex, and less reliant on quips and gadgets. He was the Bond who truly wrestled with morality, often crossing ethical lines in his quest for justice. 1923 takes that intensity and strips it of heroism, leaving behind a Bond who has abandoned service to country and queen, replacing it with service to his own insatiable desires. Where Bond uses wit and suaveness to achieve his goals, Whitfield uses them to entrap and destroy. He exudes charm, but it's a predatory, calculated charm that draws people in before devouring them. While Bond fights against villainous oligarchs who control the world through money and power, Whitfield is that oligarch. This inversion is what makes Whitfield such a biting critique of Bond. He is what the spy might become if freed from all moral obligation and conscience. The villain is a Bond gone rogue. Bond, for all his moral ambiguity, has always fought for a cause, whether it be stopping nuclear war, toppling crime syndicates, or avenging the deaths of loved ones. Whitfield, by contrast, operates without a cause beyond his own ambition. He is a villain shaped by the very traits that make Bond compelling: intelligence, determination, and an ability to see 5 steps ahead of everyone else. Instead of dismantling shadowy organizations, he builds them. Instead of taking down the corrupt elite, he is the corrupt elite. It's a clever irony that Dalton, once the rogue MI6 agent challenging the system, now embodies the system itself. Where Bond uses cunning to topple enemies, Whitfield uses it to ensure no one can touch him. The suave confidence, the piercing gaze, the effortless charm, they are all there, but rather than using them for good, Whitfield uses them to tighten his grip on those less powerful. A license to kill, financially. Bond operates in a world where a gun is often the ultimate power, but Whitfield lives in an era where money is far deadlier. 1923 is a story of land and legacy, and Whitfield understands that the true weapon of dominance isn't firepower, it's control. His wealth allows him to manipulate entire towns, orchestrate suffering from behind a desk, and systematically dismantle the Dutton family's foothold. This is where the mockery of Bond becomes most biting. Imagine if James Bond, instead of pursuing terrorists and criminal masterminds, used his intelligence and charm to crush ranchers, monopolize industries, and expand his empire. This is Whitfield. He is a master of coercion, not with a Walther PPK, but with contracts, deals, and financial leverage. And the brilliance of Dalton's performance is that he plays Whitfield with the same lethal precision that he once used as 007. The result is chilling. The ironic mirror. If James Bond has long represented a fantasy of control, the idea that one man can tip the scales in favor of good, then Donald Whitfield is a reminder of what happens when that control is used for the opposite. Bond is a singular force against corruption, but Whitfield is the embodiment of that corruption. The fact that they share the same actor is no coincidence. It is a deliberate subversion of the idea that intelligence and capability must always be virtuous. There's a moment in 1923 where Whitfield speaks with the quiet confidence of a man who knows he cannot be beaten. It's the same confidence that Bond exhibits when walking into a villain's lair. But instead of outwitting the bad guy and saving the day, Whitfield is the bad guy, and his victory is all but assured. In this way, 1923 doesn't just make Whitfield a compelling villain. It makes him a critique of the myth of the solitary hero. The legacy of Dalton's villain. Timothy Dalton's Whitfield is, in many ways, a sly meta-commentary on his past roles. For an actor who once played the world's most famous spy, his turn as a ruthless capitalist is an ironic twist of fate. He brings the same gravitas, the same commanding presence, but with all the moral weight reversed. Ultimately, 1923 asks the question, what can one man do? Through Whitfield, we get an unsettling answer. One man, given enough power and intelligence, can shape history in his image. Where Bond's actions change the world for the better, Whitfield's ensure that it remains under his thumb. In this, Dalton's performance becomes something truly special. Not just a great villain, but a reflection on what happens when the hero's gifts fall into the wrong hands. And perhaps in the end, that is the most devastating form of villainy, the kind that looks a little too familiar.